seeking to provide with this event and Bootcamp, and encourage you to take advantage of some of the resources and some of the opportunities that I'd like to address via question and answers throughout the week. Following that, we're going to be going on to the first set of sessions, and we're going to be covering this morning a bit of an overview for the use of system science methods, methods which deal with this, the science of the whole, science for dealing with systems where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, which are actually a very large fraction of the systems we interact with out there in the world and that we struggle with to set effective case management goals and effective policy. Next, I'm going to be talking about some hallmarks of a new class of data that's arisen within the past decade or two, which sometimes goes by the name of big data. And it's a very important point, a very important element of data science. These are predominantly electronic data sources, which are characterized by the 4 V's. They're high volume, that's the big and the big data. But perhaps more importantly for our purposes this week and for their relationship with system science are the other 3 elements. They're high velocity, meaning data comes in very quickly over time, which has a direct analogy to the view we get over time coming out of these models. They're high variety in the sense that from a given data source, often we're picking up several types of information that can be put together into a cohesive picture, much as a system science model depicts many different elements that make up a whole that's quite distinctive. Fourthly, they also frequently are subject to high veracity, meaning that they're picking up certain types of information about the world with greater reliability than if we relied on traditional measures alone, traditional self-reporting, for example. These sorts of data sources are important as a backdrop for this week. And indeed, much of this afternoon, I'm going to be spending giving a peek at 3 particular data sources that fall into this category. I'll come back to that. But in the final part of the morning, I'm going to be, and subject to a bit of schedule reworking that I did last night, I'm going to be addressing some common misconceptions associated with what we're trying to accomplish this week, associated with the relationship between data science and system science areas. And we're going to be talking about 3 primary ways in which data makes its way into our system science models. And then this afternoon, I'm going to be addressing 3 of those major types of big data sources that are going to follow us through this week. One of them is it consists of data from wearable devices and smartphones, such as many of us are carrying within this room. Data that provides a picture of a person's context, a person's exposures over time, their health behaviors, but also provides avenues by asking them ecological momentary assessment, these mini questionnaires, etc. Gives a picture into knowledge, attitudes, beliefs with respect to health, in which, together with the sensors, provide evidence of health behaviors. So that's one type of information that we'll be addressing this afternoon as the source of big data for models. And it's a source of big data you'll hear featured in a number of case studies during the week. We'll be looking specifically at a platform that makes defining, deploying, monitoring, and analyzing results from studies using wearables and smartphones far, far simpler than it used to be. That's the Ethica platform. And I'm grateful for those in the room for having sent me their login information from Ethica, and we'll be making use of that this afternoon and sharing some information from Ethica studies with you and creating studies ourselves. So that's one type of big data. Data, again, accompanied by the big V's. High volume, high velocity, it's coming in over time. In some cases with many measurements every 5 minutes. It's high variety, provides all sorts of information, and it's high veracity. Next, we'll be looking at information that comes in from a very different sort of data source, and that concerns search behavior over time. Search behavior may seem like an odd thing to study, types of searches people conduct over the internet. But it can often provide a window into health information seeking on the part of individuals that provides some understanding of their concerns, their interests at a given time. And by tracing it over time, we get that sort of high resolution window that we can relate to our models, to our simulation models that play out over time. So we'll be taking a look at search behavior as a somewhat aggregate in the sense that it relates to geographic regions rather than to one person, and a little bit coarse grain temporally every few hours if you're looking at the finest grain level, to every day at a high level, and we're looking at patterns that we see in that over time and relating them to the sort of things that come out of dynamic models and the need to be related to those models. And thirdly, this afternoon, we'll be talking about a different type of communicational behavior online associated with social media channels, and particularly looking at our ability to readily gather information from self-publishing platforms such as Twitter. Okay, Twitter provides beyond what we get in search data, it provides an understanding of messaging and people's responses to that messaging, a richer perspective on their thinking and their reactions to what they hear from others. Not only in terms of their actual tweets, but in terms of what they retweet or in terms of what they like, etc. And all three of these data sources provide us a situated way, a way that we can relate to a particular region geographically, behavior over time, related to health and cognitive areas. Much of the balance of the week will then be spent with techniques that can help us relate those to models. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the structure of the event, in terms of what I'm hoping to get out of it, and in terms of some of these methods right now. I did post a set of slides for this, and I'll be pointing you to those as well so that you can follow along much of the presentations yourself. Okay, so in terms of orientation and resources, maybe what I'll do is just point you to these videos and course materials up front. That will allow people to get the slides that I'm looking at right now, as well as dozens of other slides. If you want to try to get connected, a student can help you if you encounter difficulties. The Wi-Fi network of interest is Radisson Underbar Conference. There's a number of Radisson ones. This is the conference run. And the password here befits the dignity of the water body that comes through town, the river, all lowercase. And you encounter that need for a password not when you're first connecting with the network, but when you call up a browser. So I suggest that you connect to the network now, get that out of the way, because we will be using it on occasion throughout the morning and very heavily this afternoon, okay? So again, it's Radisson Conference and River. Once you're connected, once you're online, We've gone through that Radisson point of entry. Then I'd like you to try to connect to this. So it's http://tinyurl.com. That's tinyurl.com. And then Data and Systems Science 2018 Maths.
I'm getting an error.
Okay, I'm thinking that was the. Okay, I think it's actually Matt's. I'm thinking that's actually a problem. Excuse me with that. There was a need to, I think, in the end, shorten it. So it's either Matt. Yeah, it's Matt. So apologies for showing you that. I'm not sure what happened between that and the actual deployment. Does this work for you? Yeah. Okay. Apologies. By contrast, I think this one videos works fine. So the first of these points to a set of materials. You will find a folder in there called lecture slides. And one of the lecture slides says something like overview, orientation, and that's the slides I'm currently looking at. I'll buy it with that typo there. And then this other one points to a set of videos that are being created even as we speak here. I'm recording this and hopefully all future sessions. And I'll be posting them throughout the day at this YouTube playlist, which will collect the videos from the week and allow you, if you're interested, to go back and pursue, how did he do that, or what was that point he made in that earlier lecture, etc. So that's the course videos. Are people able to get to that one? Okay. Okay. So right now it's empty, but at the point of the first break, I'll be uploading my comments here and my first lecture. Okay. So goals of the bootcamp. My major goals of the bootcamp are listed as follows. The first is to lend an appreciation for why it's important that data science and system science, which are two very rapidly growing and evolving traditions within health, be applied not as solitudes, not as totally distinct traditions, but be applied together. The argument here is that not only are these two traditions complementary, they are synergistic. They amplify each other. They work to support each other in a very strong way. More than that, ladies and gentlemen, they actually need each other to accomplish their full potential. And we're going to be trying to lend an understanding of why that is, why they're such perfect complements to each other within the course of the week. Again, something that's never really been articulated outside these doors. Second of all, I'm going to try to provide guidance as to the roles that are properly played or most efficaciously played by different techniques that can link up data science and system science. It's not merely that the two are very complementary in some philosophical sense, although I know that's true. But more specifically, they're complementary in terms of concrete needs that they address for each other, and there are specific techniques, technical methods that bring them together in very hard-hitting ways, by which they can be used together to garner insight that neither would have offered in isolation, where truly the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I'm going to be trying to provide guidance as to how to best deploy these techniques. Where does one technique fit in compared to another to accomplish this, to secure this whole greater than the sum of the parts in terms of the combination of data science and system science. And I'm going to provide an understanding of the operation of those techniques, how they work, how, despite their gnarly technical nature, really what's going on there that allows them to achieve their task. I won't be going into all the algorithms at a most detailed level. For those who are interested in pursuing that, I'm glad to discuss this. And the TAs who are sitting around the room can, for various topics, I'll point to different TAs who can take you through a very detailed understanding of how to apply these in areas of your interest. I'm going to provide resources that will aid you in applying these techniques. To do so, we're going to be giving you recourse to resources in the form of models, dynamic models, simulation models, in the form of code, for example, R code, code that can be used to run PMCMC, particle Markov chain Monte Carlo techniques, etc., but also resources in the form of data collection tools, as I said earlier, for smartphone-based and wearables and techniques based on gathering search data online. We'll be giving you a set of tools that will really put you far, far ahead if you are interested in tapping that sort of big data for projects. It'll make it much easier to work with that sort of data than if you had to roll your own solution. I'm going to try to provide some higher level orientation and practice related to combining these sorts of techniques and models. It's kind of a repeat of the earlier thing, providing some sources of big data. So there's some things that I'm not trying to accomplish in the bootcamp, though, that it's important to recognize. One thing is I have neither the time nor the realistic prospect of providing a comprehensive survey of data science or system science techniques here. I could lead 2 full semester courses easily on each of those topics, and we still wouldn't have exhausted all elements of their application. There are many techniques that we will be talking about in the course of the week, for example, from data science, that are very exciting, cutting-edge techniques that we'll be pointing to for their use with system science. Examples would be particle filtering, particle MCMC, hidden Markov models. But there's a wide variety of data science techniques that I have no intention to cover. And it's not that they don't deserve consideration for their merit in addressing certain types of questions. It's just they're not denoted specifically for their complementarity with system science. You can apply them in the context of problem solving that might relate to a system science problem, but they themselves won't bring the two together. The techniques I'm going to be covering are distinguished because they specifically bring together data science with system science. They allow us to leverage system science models in a way that provides insight from rich sets of data. So those are the techniques I'm providing insights into from the data science side. And similarly from system science, people know, I lead boot camps on system science techniques themselves, an introduction, and it's not realistic for me to try to reproduce most of that material here. Many of you will have encountered system science techniques before. Those who have not, this morning I'm going to try to provide that exposure so you know something about where I'm coming from. Introduce 3 major traditions of system science, talk about why we model, talk about the use of models as thinking tools and to ask what-if questions, their need to capture causal structures so we can reason about counterfactuals, all things that will be central to our discussions this week. But I can't provide a systematic introduction to how we do agent-based modeling here. That's a separate bootcamp. And Christine will be glad to set you up for that one. I also can't provide, although I think some people in the room would sometimes like it, detailed technical tutorials on any one method because of time constraints. I'd be glad to chat about that. I'd be glad to point you to coverage where you could get a stronger understanding of it, and to point you to papers and find theses where this material is covered in great detail. But more to the point, you sit surrounded by resources in the form of TAs who can provide you on a per TA basis introduction to different methods. So this prospect of getting a detailed tutorial, you may well get that if you're seeking it. I hope you get it in the course of the week, and if you don't, speak with me and I'll try to make sure that it's facilitated. But you might not get it from my lectures in here. You might get it out here, just outside, where you could pair up with the TA for a few hours and really get into the gnarly details of that method. You really want to understand in great detail. I would like to facilitate that. I would like to make sure that anyone who really has technical questions gets them answered. But a lot of that won't go on in my lectures. It will go on outside, maybe with conversations with me or one of the students. And finally, I can't ensure that everyone who leaves the room will do so glowing with promise and facility with all these methods. Rather, it's an introduction. It might be a very empowering introduction, but it will be one where you'll need to build strength, like in any serious endeavor. Build strength to apply these techniques. And you may want to stay in touch with some of the TAs, stay in touch with us to sort of start down that journey. We'll be taking this journey this week together, but as Jeff is wont to remind us, each person ultimately must make their own journey. And we'll be trying to make sure that we set you off on that journey in an appropriate way. Okay. So I've tried to provide a set of materials on that site whose URL was misgiven that will be responsive to your needs. These materials run through a couple of types that I want to talk about because we'll be coming back to them. The set that are on there right now are not the final set. Within minutes of starting the sessions, I was updating more of them, and we'll be adding to them throughout the week. One is the preliminary schedule. I put the star there because it is preliminary. My foremost goal here is to answer your need, to address your needs in the form of questions, in the form of requests. Okay, and because of that, I expect the schedule to evolve quite a bit. But another reason for its evolution is that through the first bunch of sessions, I imagine I'm going to be getting a better read on your interests and a better read on how quickly you're passing through certain material or challenges that you're encountering, which will incline me to spend more time on a topic or less time on a topic. So I'll be triaging some things quite likely because I say we really need to hit this more fully to head off some common misunderstandings, or I'll be expanding on a topic that you request. It's very important to me that you let me know more about your interests so that I can expand further on materials. And in that sense, I'm grateful for all your feedbacks on the surveys, which have been helpful. But we're going to continue to have our ear to the ground to listen to how to adjust the schedule. Friday is going to be a very flexible day in terms of deploying additional material, but earlier days will also be affected in terms of shifting stuff. Okay, I have provided draft lecture slides for a lot of the slides. I'd say 24 maybe that are up there already. Those slides will also evolve. Clausewitz, I think said no plan survives contact with the enemy. And you folks are most definitively not the enemy. But we will be, again, sensing needs and trying to be responsive to it. You'll also find a few models. These are system science models that I've provided that should be thought-provoking. And I want to thank some of the students here who have helped contribute to those. There are models there that we'll be running this morning to build some familiarity with some of the topics we'll be discussing this week. I'm going to be placing some code there. There's actually that's a to be done type of work, and this code will be from a variety of packages, but it'll be accumulating through the week. And there's also a set of background materials that I've been compiling that reference papers, books on topics, etc. And that's not yet there. I'll be placing it there. And finally, there's a set of what I call reference decks, for lack of a better term. I'm trying to create brief, as in a small number of slides, pointers or guidelines to help you have principles for choosing different methods. When does one method fit in? When does another? Rules of thumb, guidelines. Because even for my students, it's a little bit confusing to know, when do you use particle filtering or when do you use hidden Markov models? This provides sort of an attempt to structure that discussion. Say, okay, if you're looking for this and you have this circumstance, this is what you want. Okay, try to provide that. Hopefully, that will be a point of good reference in the course of the week. So there's materials there, and there's going to be more materials. Tell me your needs, and I'll try to provide more materials. Yeah. Christine, is there a prohibition on me closing the door?
No, just that if anybody gets too warm, let us know.
Okay, that's appreciate it. I'm not sure everyone down at the registration desk is as interested as us in the room. Okay. I mentioned the teaching assistants. I can't express my gratitude enough to the TAs for coming down here on a snowy winter morning, perhaps before the time where most of you normally awake. And I know it's not easy to get down to this corner of the city from the university. So thank you very, very much. And thank you for the big contributions you are making in the course of this boot camp. The TAs will be central to delivery of this boot camp in a number of ways. The first is through case studies. The material that we're talking about here is not theoretic. The combination of data science and system science is not merely a spectator sport for the TAs. It's a performative art. And the TAs within this room have taken the combination of data science and system science to new levels in some of their work. And that's to be honored in a set of case studies that have helped me learn, that have helped them learn, and that hopefully will help you learn about how these techniques can be applied. They're also going to be aimed at assisting. This is one of the most important roles, is to help answer your ad hoc questions. So if there's something, when there's something, I say, that's not clear, just make sure you grab TAs and can ask them these questions. Hopefully they'll be able to clarify it on the spot. Otherwise, they can ask me additionally. Along the same lines, if you see a TA presenting a case study, or you see me presenting a model, and you say, that was weird, what was that? I want to know. I didn't quite get that point. How did the model do that? They can help you figure out what's going on in that model, walk you through it, walk you through the different pieces that make up a model, and talk with you about how it works, etc. Okay, so this include these sort of models and case studies. It's very important that you not leave that opportunity to waste. If there's something you see that's going on, grab any TA, and if they can't explicate it themselves, they can point to another TA who can. They say, go talk with her. She's the lead on that, so forth, or what have you. And this boot camp, as I said, it's the first time I've offered it, and I was thinking about whether to combine it, as I am wont with other events, with what we call an incubator, sort of a time where we try to grow participant projects, try to help them get conceptualized, take them to the stage where we're thinking about what needs to be in them, we formulate it, and we work towards a full-featured model. And there really wasn't the time or prospect for doing that. It may be a separate event, but it's very important to me that if you have interest in applying this work in some particular area, or you have an inkling of maybe how you could apply it, or some question, could you apply it? It's very important to me that in the course of this week, you get a clear set of guidance on that question. Now, some of that might be in discussion with me, but I hope that a lot of that will be in discussion with the TAs who surround us. So I'd like to encourage you to say, look, I've got this problem. Is that a good fit for this method we just saw? Would it be better to do it in this other way, or how would you approach it? And once again, the TAs should be encouraged to grab other people in to answer those questions more fully. So please be encouraged to make sure that if you have an idea and you're wondering about these things, by the end of the bootcamp, you have a much better idea of how to go about it in a savvy fashion, what approach you might take that will be most fruitful, etc. This bootcamp is unique. I mentioned to you it's never been given before. It's never been given before by me. To my knowledge, nothing like it has been given by anyone else anywhere in the world. And it's a reflection of our context. There's a number of ways in which there's cross-weaving of themes here. We're talking about system science and data science, but data science itself, being a collection of methods and principles and guidelines and processes and tools, mechanisms to allow us to gain insight from data. That area itself, we're going to be talking about sort of the big data sources in it, and we're going to be talking about methods, often computational statistics and machine learning methods that link in with system science. And there's this set of interweaving sort of themes that you'll be hearing. So one is the relationship of dynamic complexity and data science. Okay, now that's a mouthful. When I'm talking about dynamic complexity, I'm talking about the fact that many systems out there in the world, and specifically the systems that give us the most trouble in dealing with, are what we call, at a technical level, dynamically complex. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. We can't, any more than we can chop up an elephant into pieces and expect it to behave like the elephant in each of those pieces. We can't reduce the elephant just to its pieces to understand it. So it is with many systems. We have to understand the pieces, but the whole is different than the pieces. And we often get smacked on the head because we don't fully understand that. For decades, indeed for over a century now in the health sphere, we've been working with tools to help us manage dynamic complexity, dating back formally to the work of Ross in malaria in 1916 and the subsequent work of Cormac McKendrick in infectious disease and building on from there. So dynamic complexity is a big feature of the world around us, and it's the feature of the world around us that makes it hardest often to undertake action that's effective. To put it in Jeff's words, to put in place fixes that stay fixed. And yet, it's dealt with by a different set of scientists, a different set of techniques and processes that have traditionally been ascendant within the data science area. And how we conduct data science to address dynamic complexity most effectively is one of the foremost questions that I'm hoping to address in this bootcamp. Because if we don't undertake it in a way that addresses dynamic complexity, a lot of the solutions coming out of data science, though best intentioned, will fall flat. I can say that as a system scientist and as a data scientist. At the same time, we're going to be addressing this undercurrent, this subtext that goes on within the data science area that has to do with its relationship, and I will say uneasy relationship or uncertain relationship with theory. So there's an idea out there that we're going through a transformative revolution when it comes to how science is conducted. Having passed through several past eras of science, more recently computational science, and now we're into the data science area where there's a deluge of data that's going to help orient us and ground us and allow us to establish understanding that's been elusive because of the ability to measure so many things. But there's an important question that people have raised, and a variety of answers have been given. How does this relate to theory? How does it relate to the fact that often when we're working in areas, we have some pre-existing theory about what's going on in the world, and how does that theory relate to observations? This is, of course, an age-old question in science as a whole, but data science, with giving reference to this wave of new types of information coming in, some have argued in a millennialist way that data science is basically about eliminating the need for theory, about putting theory behind us, and operating as it's sometimes claimed in a theory-free way. I will tell you my biases. I believe that's wholly mistaken. I believe it is gravely mistaken. And I believe that, in fact, data science used properly is often best focused on explicating theory, informed theory, building theory, and yes, also capturing empirical regularities that currently lack theoretical foundation in a useful way. But it's not aimed in a millennialist way in saying theory is dead. Let us move beyond theory, which is what you'll hear sometimes some voices in heady moments claim. So we're going to be talking about theory and data science. Why talk about this in this context? Because, ladies and gentlemen, so much of system science is basically about capturing theory in an operational way in models. It's capturing theory about mechanisms in the world, positing how things are working out there in the world in a form of an agent-based model or system dynamics model, for example, and capturing it in a way that's operationalizable in the sense that we can put our assumptions into there and see what the logical consequences are and test if those are consistent with the evidence as pointed out to us through data science. System science is all about theory. And when people talk about the relationship between theory and data science, it also draws a boundary around, to a degree, the relationship between system science and data science. So this is going to be a big topic. And I'm hoping to enrich there an appreciation for how data science relates to theory, because there's a need to make sure that its implications are more broadly construed than simply, it makes theory unnecessary. Along with that is the notion of, machine learning. The techniques we're applying in the course of the week are going to draw heavily from a set of fast-growing techniques that are often referred to as machine learning techniques, subsets referred to as computational statistics techniques, that I've heard some practitioners describe as they're properly about curve fitting. They're basically about fitting data from the world, fitting patterns. And I think there's a role there for that, for capturing things in patterns in a sophisticated way that is not reducible to a simple traditional equation. But at the same time, machine learning is much more than that. And machine learning, as we'll see, will richly inform our models capturing theory with data science. Along with this is the need to conduct data science and machine learning in a way that is robust to counterfactuals. Last night I was at around 3 to 4 a.m. I was troubled by a series of knocks at my door upstairs. Knock, 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 and sort of Edgar Allan Poe sort of way. And they were looking for Greg, who was a person of uncertain character, but they were very persistent and knocking over a period of time, looking for Greg. And I thought I just heard knocking here, but at least they're not asking for Greg. Okay, so machine learning, ladies and gentlemen, as it's traditionally been construed, is largely about making use of data we've observed to gather insight, and it's a tremendously powerful set of techniques. But what we're dealing with in this boot camp is trying to conduct it in a way that makes it not backwards looking but forwards looking. And I'll just give briefly a guide to those, what I mean by those terms. When we're dealing with data we've collected from the past, that data is indicative of associations, relationships, correlations that have been observed thus far. And those often will provide us a great deal of insight as to what's associated with what goes together. But often when we're dealing with system science, and we're dealing with the challenges, complexity, our interest is in intervention. It's in bending the curve for the better. It's in making a difference, whether it's at a level, an operational level of managing a person at say a youth who's under protection and at risk, or a person who's at risk of suicidal ideation, or whether it's at a policy level. We're often interested in knowing how can we do better? How can we change things for the better? Bobby Milstein has commented about public health as focusing on health improvements, and there we're interested in interventions which often haven't been observed before. We're interested in counterfactuals, things that haven't yet taken place, and we want to know which of these actions that we might undertake could improve things most effectively. And that requires looking at more than data about the past, because often we won't have data about how things will change. if we put in place a new regimen, a new type of help for this young person at risk, or a new policy. We don't have data that directly alerts me to what's likely to change. And this is where system science comes in, and where machine learning can still help us as we change. The term is the data generating process. We alter the process that's giving rise to this data over time, and we want to understand, are we headed in the right direction? We want to inform our models, and machine learning plays a big role in that way too. Forwards looking, not merely backwards looking, not merely operating on data out of the past from a situation which has now changed because of an intervention, but as a way to look forward into guidance. And finally, we're going to be central to this is it talks about the complementary roles and synergistic and even cross-needed roles of big data machine learning on the one hand and system science on the other. Okay. So I mentioned the focus of data science is addressing mechanisms, processes, principles, and practices and methodologies for drawing insight from data. This is a big topic. It relates to scalable computational methods and storage of large volumes of data and storage of that data in a privacy-preserving way, in ways of effectively analyzing that data and visualizing that data to capture insight. We're going to be talking about this in two particular ways. One is use of big data. These techniques recommended by the 4 V's, again, volume, velocity, variety, and veracity. But we're also going to be talking about this because drawing insight from data often draws very centrally on machine learning and computational statistics methods that will form the focus of our there's an aspiration in data science. If you read more broadly about it, there's an aspiration in data science to use this new ascendant world of measurability to quantify things around us, to get data where it's been lacking previously, to really not only generally draw insights, but to understand the richness of how the world works, of the processes in the world. And I would argue that it's particularly there that system science comes in. Because system science is all about reasoning what's going on in the world. What are the underlying processes? What are the mechanisms by which the world is working? And data science, in as much as it aspires to inform this, is really talking about informing and working with system science. System science often goes by the name of complexity science. I know is familiar to many of you at some level, but also totally unfamiliar to others. We refer to system science as the science of the whole. That's my term for it, because it deals with these systems where the whole is different than the sum of the parts, informally where it's greater. And I referred earlier to the analogy of living systems, right? The elephant. It's not merely a collection of legs and trunks and ears, but it's something about how they all fit together and work together. That's the relevant thing if you're trying to train that elephant. So system science is focused on characterizing, analyzing, reasoning about, and managing complex systems. These systems, which often exhibit surprising behavior. They surprise us by their reaction to it because of a variety of characteristics, some of which are codified in one of those sets of slides I've given you. And the central mode for dealing with these systems, or a central mode, is to understand the mechanisms underlying the causal pathways by which they play out. So system science aims to provide us these set of tools to help us understand and reason about these systems, And a central way to do it, that it does it, is through dynamic models. These models will be running starting this morning, but which will accompany us throughout the week. And these models basically are ways of capturing these operationalized theory or hypotheses about the world. And they represent how things might work out there in the world so that we can more quickly spot errors in our thinking, so that we can share our thinking with others and open it up to collective refinement. And so that we can reason about its consistency with the evidence and evolve it. So system science is often focused around models, dynamic models in particular. So the fundamental theses that I'm advancing here in this bootcamp, the fundamental theses are that, number one, system science and data science are synergistic. They work together hand in glove very effectively. But that to accomplish their goals, the goals of system science, it needs data science. To accomplish the goals of data science, it needs system science to realize their full potential. To accomplish this aim of understanding the richness of underlying processes in the world that give rise to data, we need system science. For system science to build models that are responsive and that stay updated, et cetera, we need data science. So why is this? Well, system science needs data science to more quickly challenge and refine dynamic models. We build models that are tools for learning, and the way we learn, it's a humbling thing, but the way we learn is to challenge those models with data. If the model proves inadequate to characterize what we observe from the world, it's not a failure. It shouldn't be so much regarded as a failure of the model, but a success of learning, because often we wouldn't have realized this inconsistency between that theory and the world without a model to show us that it's inconsistent, model and data. So data science can help us challenge and refine these models more quickly, which basically means we can learn more quickly. It can help ground the model in new evidence as it comes in, help it adapt to a changing situation. It can help us more effectively evaluate interventions, it turns out. One of the foremost goals of system science is to be forward-looking, to say, how do we change things for the better when we're dealing with these complex systems? How do we put in place, again, citing Jeff, fixes that stay fixed? And as such, it's focused on intervening. It's focused on changing things, changing the data generating process. And it turns out data science can help us assess the response of our system to intervention more quickly, learn more quickly from interventions, correct our models, and intervene more effectively. It turns out data science also allows us to undertake a very powerful set of tools that can help us get direct insight into what's needed to capture and model structure by supporting something called state space reconstruction. And finally, and this is the subject of a lot of back and forth between Jeff and Tam, who's here, and Wagdy, to transform models from discrete products which are frozen in time. We build this model, it captures knowledge from that time, and from then on, we use it, but it grows increasingly disconnected with the world, into constantly updated depiction of the world that stays current, stays fresh, can always be asked to look forward. Now, why does data science need system science? Well, to capture theory in the form of causal connections. Data science needs theory, it's my belief. It's not that all things in data science need theory, far from it. There's room for capturing empirical regularities where there's no theory. But for explicating processes in the world, reasoning about counterfactuals, it needs theory. And system science provides a way of capturing that in the form of causal connections. So data science needs to deal with the fact that there's complex dynamics in the world. Things take time to play out. We're not just taking a static often we can't just take a static view of a situation of how is A related to B in some abstract way. It takes time for A to influence B, and over time, B responds to changes in A. There's dynamics over time, change over time that takes place. And data science needs system science to really formulate it and grapple with that. Data science also is not just about turning on a spigot in some disconnected way and letting data that's just flow in some fashion that's quite passive. Often it requires us to collect data, and what data we collect and how finely we collect it can be informed by system science. Data science can illuminate underlying mechanisms when connected with system science, can identify causal connections, and communicate effective explanations. So these are high-level points that I'm going to be coming back to. I'm articulating them now, and I'm going to articulate them at the end of the boot camp with lots of examples that have pointed to them. But the picture here is a radical one. The picture is that these techniques taught separately are best applied together for large numbers of different types of challenges and questions. The challenge this week in conveying this is going to be the diversity of material and backgrounds in the room. Many will need to be exposed to system science essentials, starting in minutes. Others are very unfamiliar with elements of data science, and will need to be attuned to what is meant by big data and some of these machine learning approaches. Many people have neither of these. And I'm going to ask your accommodation for needing to address these different needs. There are going to be times where I am going to engage in technically rich muttering. And I'm going to ask for those who are uninterested in that to excuse my my geekiness. Well, I have to ask that all the time, right? But there's going to be other times where I'm going to be trying to address something predominantly at a higher or philosophical level to communicate a very important point, and I won't be down in the details of the algorithms and so on. And I'm going to have to ask people to have patience with that. I'm dealing here with people of very different needs sometimes, and the questions I expect to be of very different sorts. I welcome questions at any of these levels, because the truth is that even some of the best practitioners in the data science area, system science area, are going to be completely naive with respect to the other area. And this is our chance to try to articulate some basics in each of these areas that will help an understanding of how they come together. So I'll ask your accommodation in the course of the boot camp about these elements. So a lot there in the orientation and resources. Any questions about the boot camp before we dive into a model? Get that blood going. No? Questions I can answer? Needs I can address? Okay, it's a silent crowd. That's okay. I know I'm a strange beast to watch. So we'll pause that, stop that recording, and I will go on and seek to have us build up or observe our first model here. Okay. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I had asked you to install a software package that's called AnyLogic. Okay? And I know many of you have installed that because you've let me know that. If you haven't had a chance to install it, I will point you to the site right now, and you're welcome to download it. and install it. Alternatively, if you're more comfortable with it, you can pull up next to the person next to you and take a look at it there, okay? So if you go to www.anylogic.com and downloads, so /downloads, www.anylogic.com/downloads, you'll see a set of possible downloads. We're going to be downloading the free version here, Personal Learning Edition. You could download it. There'll be a little form for you to fill in. It's free, and it will download, and you can then install it. I'm going to assume that most people here have already done so, and will therefore proceed to the next steps. But those of you who want to install it now are encouraged to do so. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is first exposure to a model. Okay, and following this, we're going to have a break, but I want to